Hi there. Welcome to episode 134, which is a Girl Take the Lead soundbite. And a soundbite is a shorter episode that builds on a previous topic we've covered or is just an inspiration. And I'm your host, Yo Canny. Before we get started today, though, I had to thank a couple of my listeners who commented on our Facebook group, Girl Take the Lead, and you can join anytime, and we'd love to have you there, about our previous question about values. And I wanted to just give you a couple things that they had to say because it was so good. So here we go. I value trust the most, trusting that we feel safe to be ourselves, trusting that it's safe to lower the wall. When we reconnect, it's like no time passed, and we can say anything. There's no judgment, and we don't have to say anything. There's no judgment about that. I loved those two passages, and I just wanted to make sure that you got to hear them too. Today, in this episode, we're going to be talking about the loss of friendship. So, if those things are so beautiful, being able to trust, being with someone who has no judgment, and then it fizzles, like, how do we cope? So, I found this article, which I think will be very helpful to us. The article was called Why Friendships End and How to Cope by A. Pawlowski. And she's a Today health reporter focusing on health news and features. Previously, she was a writer, producer, and editor at CNN. We all know that when friendships end, it can be very painful. And even sometimes we can go to shame, like there's something wrong with us and this feels like it's my fault and that people really don't like me and who I am at the core. And when we have a shared history with somebody, the longer the history, perhaps the greater the pain when we lose them. And when we're not given a reason for why that friendship ended, we can make stuff up and take it very personally as to what happened. Or sometimes we just go and say, I don't know what happened, and just keep going. And we have a lot of incompletions. One of the things the article points out is that we all need to grieve and go through the process of grieving with those relationships, especially the ones that were older and dearest to us. When I look at my own endings on some of those friendships, I get a little sheepish. Like, I'm kind of embarrassed about them and how I kind of just started ghosting people, like didn't answer things or just wanted to go silent. I just never wanted to confront anything. And one of the things we'll do in this episode is there's some great recommendations from this article about how to cope better than I did by putting things up there that were just, not giving the other person any benefit to fix the relationship or to make it heal. There's some research that indicates that connectedness with other people is the only factor that consistently predicts our happiness. And this was mentioned by Marissa Franco, who teaches a class on loneliness at the University of Maryland. Wow. Can you imagine taking a class on loneliness? I never had those kinds of classes when I was in college. How cool would that have been? She goes on to say this, that when we're connected, we release oxytocin, a hormone that's considered the fountain of youth, which is why connection makes us feel better, regulates our emotions, decreases our stress, and makes us feel more capable of challenges. That's cool, right? Very cool. Research indicates that women's relationships are emotionally based, where men's relationships with their friends are activity based. So if our emotions are at the core of our friendships with other women, no wonder we can feel very badly when they end. And those feelings are all real. So let's embrace them One of the things also is that tension is not the reason that friendships end. The article says they just fizzle out. We go on, right? We do different things. Some of the things that they say about that are friends move on, got a new job, started a family. I know that was a big one in my life. And we just gradually stop talking to each other. One study found we lose about half our friends every 7 years. Just think on that a minute. Half our friends every 7 years. Oh my gosh, that's a lot of friends. I think we'd all agree that we're all allowed to grow and change and move on. And one of the things I've come to understand is that no matter how long or short a person has been in my life, they were there to teach me something and to learn what that relationship was about for me. Yeah. And the article goes on to say this: sometimes we feel as though we outgrow our friends. Sometimes we can feel like, I'm not sure that I want this person in my life anymore. I'm not sure I want to spend time with them. I'm not sure this is really benefiting me. And when there is an abrupt end, one party may feel it's not worth it to continue, perhaps because the friendship is toxic or unbalanced. Well, let's think about that a moment. Unbalanced. Oh my gosh, that one hits me like a ton of bricks. So many times I was the one trying to plan everything, get us together, make sure we were having, time and opportunities. And I just eventually got tired and there was no commitment on the other end. So that one just fizzled out. I think that happens. Here are some of the signs that the article said you might look for in your friendships to see if they're starting to fizzle. Is there a sudden deviation from patterns that you've had? Is there a desire to withdraw or avoid? Maybe you stop talking as much. You're not trying to set up plans. There are fewer texts and calls. It takes work, doesn't it, to keep a relationship going with a friend. And when it gets to be a little bit hard to get together or there isn't the reciprocity, that's something to take a look at. The article has a suggestion on how you might save a friendship and a conversation that might go like this: Hey, I notice we've been in contact less. I'm not sure if you're just busy or if there's something that's on your mind. But if so, I'm totally open to hearing about it because I really value our relationship. The article adds this: friendships heal by making the unsaid said, and they die from the unsaid never being said. And it goes on to say, have those conversations instead of just quietly sulking, because that's slow poison for a friendship. Oh boy. I thought when I read that, I went, oh my gosh, that is so hard to do, to have that kind of conversation, because I avoid conflict like the plague. Really. I hate conflict. I think this could be another topic for another episode. Also, the article talks about, let's normalize friendships when they end. I think that's something that was kind of novel for me when I started to think about it, because most of the time I'm just going away. But if we normalize that friendships come and they go and they're there, perhaps there's no shame, there's no embarrassment, there's no feeling of being left out. And I think because we have so many friends, that it's easier to just kind of go away and ghost, because there's a lot more to take up the time. That's an interesting thing to think about versus romantic relationships, which tend to be just one person. One of the things about this article that really got me was the conversation about Colin Farrell's character in the movie Banshees of Inisherin, and how desperate he was to find out what was wrong and to try and fix it, and doing whatever he could. And then, of course, it gets pretty much out of control. But, I could relate to that character. I don't know if you can, but that character was trying so hard to find out what was going on. And I have been there. I have been in wanting this person to be my friend so desperately and not understanding why they didn't want to be my friend. It's hard for people to be honest about that. So I know that it's bigger than me, that it's usually not about me, it's something about the person. And sometimes there's more to the backstory, like somebody said something about you to that person and they changed their mind about you or whatever it is. It's just bigger than just me. As we normalize this idea of friendships fizzling, perhaps we need to also look and normalize some of the emotions that are likely to come up. Things like anger, confusion, frustration, sadness, and grief. When those things come up, we can talk about it with a friend, we can journal, we can write about it, we can begin to observe what those emotions feel like and what they look like, and just let them go through us and go, oh, yeah, there's sadness, and just let it be for the moment. One of the other ways of coping that this article talked about was using songs and music. And some that came to me right away were like Carole King, You've Got a Friend, or Bill Withers, Lean on Me, or, oh, and Stand By Me, right? That's another good one. What would be on your friendship playlist? I'd love to hear. Put it in the comments so I know. I'd love to know what you think there. Perhaps one more emotion that the article didn't mention that I think about when it comes to a loss of a friend is resentment. Oh, yeah. Like I resent that person when they don't like me. It's like, what happened here? And of course, I think you know where I'm going to go because a lot of you that have listened to my podcast know that my favorite go to book is Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. So let's look and see what Brene has to say about resentment. It's a place we go when we compare. Her definition is the feeling of frustration, judgment, anger, better than, and or hidden envy related to perceived unfairness or injustice. It's an emotion that we often experience when we fail to set boundaries or ask for what we need, or when expectations let us down because they were based on things we can't control, like what other people think, what they feel, or how they're going to react. Oh boy, does that sound familiar? When you read it, you go, why on earth would I hold a resentment for someone who didn't want to be my friend? It wasn't anything I could control. It was just something that happened. So perhaps it's a lot easier to let go when we realize this is something that's just totally out of our realm. I know we didn't get our way. I want to go off. I want to sulk. And get over it, yo. Not everybody's going to like you, or you're not going to be everybody's cup of tea. The other thing I think is, in addition to not being everybody's cup of tea, is knowing that sometimes it's not about me. Sometimes there's things going on in their life or in who they're being that no longer make it possible for us to be friends. So we can let it go because most of the time it's about them, not about us. And perhaps it's a good place to end our episode today. But before we end, I want to tell you next week we have a guest. Lane Gardner will be joining us about creative expression for healing. Oh, such a good episode. So I hope you'll join for that. And before we end, I'd like to share a quote with you from Martin Luther King, who said, "In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." Thanks for being here, and thanks for joining us today. And leave a comment if you like this episode. Love to have you join us again. Take care. Bye.